Ahead of Trump's swearing in, TikTok has been restored in the US as Trump says he would find a way to let the Chinese app operate in the US, even as TikTok owner WIDEN says it won't sell. US-based short seller Hindenburg's founder Nate Anderson, who said he would wind up the research firm, is under scrutiny for sharing a report with a hedge fund ahead of the market regulator. This as per a Canadian news outlet. Flight operations at Delhi airport disrupted for Republic Day rehearsals. No flights between 10:15 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. until Jan 26th. And in the run-up to Budget 2025, is it time to bid goodbye to the old tax regime? We discuss how the government can simplify the tax regime and widen the tax net. Paytm, Zomato and Dixon will announce their Q3 results today. We bring you a preview of what's in store. And over the weekend, EPFO, the Employee Provident Fund Organization, has introduced changes to fund transfer as well as data updation by members. No need for employer verification and ease of transfer of funds has been promised. To begin with, the Employees Provident Fund Organization, or EPFO, is set to change the way its 70 million members access their retirement savings. EPFO 3.0, that was introduced by Union Labour Minister Mansukh Mandaviya, comes with a whole new set of features. Let's look at what these features are. To begin with, an ATM card that functions just like any other bank ATM card. EPFO members will be able to withdraw funds, whether it's for medical emergency or any other urgent financial need. Now, accessing EPF savings will be as simple as withdrawing cash from an ATM. That's what has been promised. An updated EPFO website or a portal where members can correct personal details. Changes by Aadhaar verified account holders will no longer require the approval of the HR department of existing or previous employers. The portal would also allow employees to self-correct the most common errors in their personal details without any verification from the employer. So, if the employee has a valid universal account number or UAN issued after the 1st of October 2017, the date when Aadhaar matching had been made compulsory. Over and above, EPFO 3.0 would have a dedicated mobile app for its members as well. Now, EPFO 3.0 aims to give members convenience at their fingertips while reducing processing time significantly. Let's move on now to the big story that we are doing ahead of Union Budget 2025, and this comes by way of a demand for simplification of the tax regime, the individual tax regime under which most Indians, especially those belonging to the middle class, pay their taxes. First up, let's look at what the slabs are between the old and the new tax regime and how these two tax regimes, which were introduced as an option about 5 years ago, have actually panned out for the country. Well, under the old tax regime, there is a nil taxation up to 2.5 lakh rupees. That happens to be the case even for the new tax regime. And then tax slabs change pretty much every 2.5 lakh rupees or so. So, for example, in the 5 lakh to 7.5 lakh tax bracket, under the old tax regime, there's a 20% tax which has been reduced to 10% under the new tax regime. From the 7.5 lakh to 10 lakh window, the old tax regime continues to tax at 20%, while the new tax regime at just 15%. Now, 10 lakh to 12.5 lakh income bracket attracted a 30% tax slab under the old tax regime, but 20% under the new tax regime, and 12.5 to 15 lakh attracted a 30% tax rate under the old tax regime and 25% under the new tax regime. However, in income cases above 15 lakh rupees, there's a 30% tax rate applicable under both old and the new tax regime. Now, what we were showing you on the screen up until now were the deductions allowed under the old tax regime. And there is a call from various quarters that perhaps these tax regimes and the deductions under the old tax regime could perhaps be done away with. So what are these deductions? You have a 1.5 lakh deduction under Section 80C, health insurance premium under Section 80D up to 25,000 rupees. That goes up to 50,000 in the case of senior citizens. Home loan interest under Section 24B at 2 lakh rupees cap, and HRA under Section 1013A up to 50% of the basic salary, while standard deduction being about 50%. Now, what does data tell us about it being time to bid goodbye to the old tax regime? Well, data tells us that 7.28 crore Indians have filed taxes in assessment year 2024-25. This is a 7.5% increase over the previous year's 6.77 crore tax filers. Now, interestingly, there are about 72% Indians who have opted for the new tax regime, and just about 28% or 2 crore Indians who've opted for the old tax regime. So the question that we are asking this morning is that should the government simplify taxation with just one tax regime? We have Mr. S. Vasudevan, Executive Partner at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan joining us this morning. Good morning, Mr. Vasudevan. Help us understand, if more and more Indians are opting for the new tax regime, it tells us that there isn't perhaps as much case for offering these various deductions that we spoke about. Is it time for Finance Minister to bid adieu to the old tax regime?
Yeah, good morning, Karthik, and good morning to all your viewers. I do believe that the way forward is going to be the new tax regime, wherein it's all about moderating the tax rates and removing all the exemptions and reductions. So I do agree with you that there may be temptation to offer further concessions, further reductions to achieve certain very specific objectives. But keeping the overall plan in mind, I think that the government may not succumb to that temptation, and they may continue giving more impetus to the new regime, and maybe they may offer some kind of rate reduction in the new regime. They may increase these exemption limits, etc. But I will be very surprised if they go back to the old ways of offering very specific exemptions and reductions.
Okay, but what is the rationale for the government, even 5 years after announcing two tax regimes, to stick to two tax regimes and giving that choice to individuals to file their taxes in either of the two? Should there not be one simplified, unified tax regime, and that becomes a mandate across the board for everybody who's filing taxes?
Absolutely. I think that's the end game. It will be only one regime at some point of time. Maybe this budget, maybe next budget, that I'm not able to predict. But you're right that 72% is a good enough number for the government to now consider doing away completely with the old regime and only having the new regime. But probably they have their own numbers. They know when to make that switch over. Maybe this is the year.
Okay, maybe this is the year, maybe not. Well, it's all in the realm of speculation right now, Mr. Vasudevan. But I also want to understand from you that if there are likely to be any tax tweaks, and if there is going to be any change in the slab rate under the new tax regime, then what makes a good case for the government to make those changes? Which are the slabs under which you believe that there is a case to increase or reduce the effective tax rate? Should it be for for the high income, those drawing salary above 50 lakh rupees, and this is a demand that has come from many quarters, that the 30% tax rate should be valid only for those who are making in excess of 50 lakh rupees income, and there should be a reduced tax slab for those who are making under 50 lakh rupees? Or should there be perhaps a nil taxation going up all the way to about 10 lakh rupees from the current just about 2.5 lakh rupees or so?
Yeah, I think one case for reducing the tax rates could be that there has been a lot of hue and cry about the consumption levels going down, the growth slowing down, etc. So maybe that may be one reason why the government may consider putting more money in the pockets of the taxpayers, so that the consumption level can increase, or it can at least be maintained. Now, when it comes to the question of which slab they should be tinkering with, again, it's a matter of number crunching, which I'm sure the government will be doing. yes, no doubt when it comes to the number of taxpayers, it will be more at the lower slabs. When you talk about the higher slabs, the number of taxpayers may be low. So more from a political standpoint, they may be looking at offering some kind of a benefit even to the smaller taxpayers. So maybe sort of a graded increase in these slab rates can happen. But again, these are all things which also will depend on so many other things which the government is going to do, how much money they need for other spending. Also, we are talking about increasing the capital expenditure. So, and also about spending on infrastructure. So, how much elbow room the government is going to have. Maybe we are away from an election year. Maybe that can be one of the factors that the government may consider, that probably next 2-3 years they have to focus on fiscal consolidation and keep some of these populist measures out of the window. So I think there may be some bit of good news which they would like to give to the taxpayers, but it may not be very significant, is what I think.
Okay, some relief, maybe not that significant, but there's a dichotomy here. At one level, we want more income in the hands of the middle class to drive the consumption story, and that in any case is going to lead to better fiscal numbers for the government of India. If not great fiscal consolidation, at least consumption, by way of being 60% of a contributor to the GDP, will see some sort of a fillip. But on the other side, as middle class Indians, we also grapple with the fact that most of the 7 crore plus Indians who are paying taxes are actually filing nil returns as part of their taxes. So any tinkering on the slab rate to increase the threshold of nil taxation will actually result in more number of nil taxpayers and is going to contradict the consumption hypothesis. So how do you view this balancing act which the government is expected to do?
Yeah. So I think according to me, the way this government has been approaching it all along has been to, say, for example, focus on employment generation, to increase manufacturing in India, to encourage more and more investment coming into India. And they believe that by increasing the employment and sort of increasing the average income levels, automatically it is going to result in more taxes. I think that that's the philosophy, rather than simply reducing the tax rates and putting more money into the existing taxpayers' hands. So maybe there is some success which they have achieved based on it. Maybe they may come up with more such measures which will boost the consumption in an indirect way, rather than directly putting some cash into the hands of the taxpayers.
All right. Well, we still have another 10 working days. Remember, it's a Monday. We have this entire week and the week after that before the 1st of February, which is a Saturday, when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman would be presenting her budget. But for now, let's leave it at that. Mr. Vasudevan, thank you so much for taking out time this morning and joining us on News 9 Live.
Thank you.
Well, with that, it's time to head into a quick break. But coming up on the other side, we will have the implication of the trade tariff which President Donald Trump is likely to impose on the world, including India, China, Mexico and Canada, among all other countries of the world. We'll have that discussion with Lloyd Matthias, angel investor, who will be joining us. And also on the show, we will have an update on the mood of the markets this morning with Devin Choksey. Stay tuned to News 9 Live.
We have people coming in, millions and millions of people coming in. A dictator showing for one day, and I'm going to close up the border, and I'm going to drill, baby drill, and after that I'm not going to become a dictator. They keep saying, he's a threat to democracy. I'm saying, what the hell did I do for democracy? Last week I took a bullet for democracy. Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. We gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
A deep dive into what matters to you the most. Angles you won't find anywhere else. News that impacts your life.
India spends $75 billion on foreign cargo vessels.
$75 billion per annum. That's a lot of money.
Imagine a situation where 95% of our cargo is coming on ships which are not owned by us. If we are still not prepared, if someone were to say that we are not going to give you ships, then we'll be stuck. So the entire nation's economy is at risk.
We are very clear that shipping is also strategic, because without that you can't really be the third largest economy in the world.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9 Live. The markets have opened just a few minutes ago. Let's look at how the Nifty 50 and Sensex are faring on the charts this morning. Well, a positive start for Nifty 50. It is holding above the 23,250 levels, which was a difficult feat for it to achieve last week. But this morning, Nifty 50 up about 2.6%, holding on to that 23,250 and above levels. We also have good news coming on the mid-cap front. The mid-cap 100 index is up about 0.5%, touching the 55,000 levels on the index. Volatility is high today, up about 4.5% at about 16.4 this morning. Let's look at the heat map of Nifty 50 and see which are the sectors which are in the green this morning and which are the sectors which seem to be outperforming. Let's look at the Nifty 50 heat map on your screen right now. You've got a mixed bag coming in from the banking stocks. HDFC Bank is down about 0.5% this morning. ICICI Bank down about 0.7%. You have a mixed bag. SBI is up about 1% this morning. Meanwhile, Reliance Industries is up about 0.6%, and a mixed bag even from the IT sector, with TCS down about 0.4%, HCL Tech down about 0.7%. Wipro, on the contrary, is up almost 8% in trading this morning. Well, that's the mood of the market, but the mood of the world this morning is to do with what is happening in the United States. That's right. US President Donald Trump is slated to take oath today as the 47th president of the United States. And that is the big story that we will be tracking this all day today and in the next few days. Donald Trump is expected to take oath today, the 20th of January. Now, why is this important for India? It's important because Donald Trump is keen to impose a 20% tariff on all imports into the US coming from India. Remember, currently India enjoys an effective tariff rate of just 3%. In fact, in 2023, India's exports to the US stood at about $84 billion. Now, Trump's tariffs could cost Indian exports as much as $14.6 billion as per a report by BCG, the Boston Consulting Group. India's pharma sector and auto components could be hit the hardest when it comes to Trump's tariffs. And remember, jobs in the pharma sector as well as the auto sector could get impacted if Donald Trump is to continue with his tariff policy that he claimed his administration would impose if he comes back to power. And there you have it. He has come back to power and he would be taking oath as the 47th president of the United States today. Now, India, despite these high tariffs, is likely to be better positioned than China, Canada and Mexico. Remember, Donald Trump is keen to tax Chinese imports into the US at 60%, while Canada and Mexico imports into the US will be taxed at 25%. At least that is what his original plan was slated to be. Foreign investors, in the meantime, are pulling money out of India on account of a strengthening dollar, and markets have been under pressure across all emerging economies, including India. So what is really going to transpire as Donald Trump takes oath is something that we will be looking out for all of today. Meanwhile, remember, as I told you, today is when Donald Trump, 10:30 p.m. India time, which is actually going to be early morning in the US, is when Donald J. Trump will be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States for the second time. Remember, he was also the 45th POTUS, and this time, after a single term of Joe Biden's administration, Donald Trump is going to come back to power. The ceremony is all set to take place inside the US Capitol in a break from tradition because of record cold temperatures. And the highlight of the ceremony will be the who's who of the political and financial world who would be in attendance. In addition to the four living presidents, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris is also expected to attend. A slate of tech CEOs, with the most prominent among them Elon Musk, SpaceX CEO, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Amazon's chief Jeff Bezos, Apple's Tim Cook and TikTok's Shou Chew are expected to be present at Donald Trump's swearing in. Foreign leaders, including Argentina's president and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, will be in attendance. China's Vice President Han Zheng is also invited, and from India, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will be present, emphasizing the growing partnership between the two nations. Business tycoon Mukesh Ambani and Neeta Ambani were also photographed in the US yesterday next to Donald Trump, and they are likely to be present as well at the oath-taking ceremony. But coming back to the tariffs and what Donald Trump's presidency could mean for India, I have with me now Mr. Lloyd Mathias, angel investor and corporate veteran, joining me. Mr. Lloyd Mathias, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on News 9 Live. Help us understand a 20% tariff on India versus the effective tariff rate of just 3%. How bad is it as a news item for India's exports into US?
Good morning, Karthik. Great to be on your show. Yes, it is indeed a historic day. I think Mr. Trump is a force of nature, as the last, shall we say, 8 years have proved. And who would have thought, 4 years ago that this would have been possible? But as it happens, he makes most things possible. A good or bad, one would never know. I think the tariffs are a definitive threat. But I think even before we get into the tariff discussion, I think one factor one has to keep in mind is that there is a genuine sense that, for whatever it's worth, Donald Trump will be one of the most business-friendly presidents. His clear move away from hostilities. There is a feeling that the whole cessation of hostilities in Israel and Gaza right now has been prompted by his impending, taking oath today. There is a feeling that hopefully sooner than later, even possibly the Russia-Ukraine hostilities will cease. And that in general bodes well for business. So at a macro level, I think there is certain positive inclinations. I think the other point is really the fact that he's still, in that sense, pretty much a believer in fossil fuels. That might bode well in terms for oil prices, which has a significant impact for India, specifically when it comes to things like inflation. I think the tariff threat is no doubt real. And the gap between what Donald Trump says and what Donald Trump does is normally very little. So there is a very high say-do index. But as your report pointed out, I think a lot of the focus initially, a lot of the kind of grandstanding is going to be very centered around China to start with. While India certainly is in line of fire in that context, I still think that the kind of tariff structure that he's thinking of imposing in China will possibly not alter things too dramatically for Indian exporters. In the short term, yes, the fact that we're talking of really a jump from a 3% to 20% is going to be a little worrying. But I think that is one concern. The little pullback mechanisms that I would see was the fact that he has a lot of, let's just say not a lot, but a lot of influence of corporates in his cabinet, so to speak, with Musk playing a very disproportionately large role. I think there would be a lot of pro-business policies. And in the in the middle term, I think this would make a lot of dents and would be actually quite positive in the context of business and specifically for India.
Okay, you think that the pro-business approach will be a positive for the world economy, and also for India. But Lloyd, I believe that his pro-business policies are going to be pro-US business, and hence this whole conflict about the kind of imports and the tariffs on the imports that Donald Trump is likely to impose. But I mean, we'll have to wait and see how this really plays out. But what I want to ask you is that what happens to inflation in the US with these tariffs imposed on everything that the US imports from anywhere in the world, all the way from 60% tariffs on China, 25% from Mexico and Canada, and 20% for the rest of the world that India is also part of. What happens to the inflation story in the US? Because inflation again has been a mixed bag. When some months we've seen the numbers come into a correction mode, but now last month again we saw 2.9% inflation, well above the Fed's threshold. So how do you see the inflation story in the US panning out, and the impact of that on the US economy and on the rest of the world?
That's a definite threat, Karthik. But the way I look at it is that the first phase will all about be getting jobs back, getting unemployment to near zero, getting that part, getting the whole machismo of the US economy, which is really what's Donald Trump's strongest card. I think the first part of the focus is really about getting jobs back and talking about the fact that we've pulled back so many businesses that were really outsourced, or so many services that were outsourced. I think that's going to be his first focus. That will no doubt have a bit of an inflationary impact. In fact, not just a bit, a sizable amount, because a whole lot of goods that Americans consume today are manufactured overseas, or a lot of services are actually outsourced overseas, and India is a big recipient of that. So I think that's going to have an impact. But I think the initial focus is going to be about reducing unemployment and therefore bringing US jobs back. Two is about clamping down vigorously on immigration. Right, what is talked about illegal immigration may also impact a lot of outsourced, nationals sitting in the US. So I think that part is going to be the first focus. I think the moment concerns about inflation start to rise among the US populace, I think that's when there will be a little bit of, a little bit of moderation in terms of business. It was like the whole discussion before, a month ago, about the whole H-1B visas. I think the moment the two techies stepped in and Musk talked about it, one saw that he kind of diluted his position. So I think there would be a little bit about a little moderation that comes in. But I think initially there is a definitive threat on inflation within the US, but it'll be countered by the fact that we've got a lot of jobs back. We've managed to get a lot of illegal immigrants out of the country, and therefore it's kind of making America great again, playing to his larger slogan. I think that's one aspect. The second, of course, will be the global outreach, the fact that the global policing role that the US has played, which actually put a lot of feet on street in different alien markets, that will reduce as he tries to close hostilities elsewhere in the world. One example is already before us, but I think sooner or later that would be the other part, saying that we're actually going to make sure that our people stay within the country, that the US has more jobs, that immigrants don't take our jobs. And then I think it will come down to a little bit of moderation when it comes to talks about inflation, which are really no doubt a real threat.
All right. And what about the tech oligarchs? And this is something that Joe Biden in his farewell address had also mentioned and had warned America against. I think the impact of that is not just going to be on the United States, it's going to be on the entire world. And we've seen a change of stance from entrepreneurs like Mark Zuckerberg, who was a subject of attention and target for Donald Trump initially, who has now done away with policing and moderation on its platforms, both Facebook, Meta, as well as WhatsApp for Business, and has in fact contributed about $1 million to Trump's swearing-in ceremony slated today. So is the case with Amazon's Jeff Bezos. So this extreme power, and of course, I mean, how can we forget Elon Musk, Donald Trump's right-hand man, all through the later phase of his campaign till, the DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency, pretty much being privatized in the hands of one man called Elon Musk. So extreme power in the hands of very few tech oligarchs, something Joe Biden had warned the US against, is now pretty much coming right in front of our eyes with their presence and their contributions in the oath-taking ceremony. How is this going to impact the face of big tech, and how is this going to influence policy going forward for the US and the rest of the world?
Karthik, absolutely. I think in that sense, this is a seminal moment for global politics. Till as recently as 4 years ago, there were talks about investigations into influence on elections by global social media platforms. Now they're an integral part of this entire Trump campaign. So I think the gap between church and state, or business and politics, that was a holy grail that most democracies in the world swore by, I think that's pretty much come to an end. Just looking at the whole build-up into the last 3 months, and in fact, Elon Musk's role right through the Trump campaign, the Trump 2024 campaign, I think has really kind of blurred that line completely. And again, what's more startling, like you rightly pointed out, is the change of mood of a lot of the others who initially were quite, let's say, hostile towards the Trump campaign. The fact that, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg have actually come around. I think this is a new trend. I think the impact is yet to be seen. At a macro level, it's clearly worrying. I think the Biden warning about tech oligarchs having a disproportionate say in US policies, and therefore, in a sense, global policy, given the role that US plays, I think is a definitive concern. One hopes that a lot of this is, A, going to be moderated. 2, is going to be for the common good. The fact that what happens in the US quickly casts a spread across the world, specifically to the, to Western Europe and the other kind of Anglo-oriented markets, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, of course. And I think that is something that's a bit of a wait and watch. I do believe that at one level, it will result in more business, industry, technology favorable policies, which is positive. But I think the fact that large business is going to have a say in how the masses are going to live their lives, I think comes with a bit of a mixed bag. There already are concerns about global wealth being concentrated in a very small percentage of the population.
Right.
If global power of a world force like the US is going to be concentrated with a few individuals, I think there's a serious concern. And I would at this say all we can do is hope for the best. But I think, in a sense, it is a big shift in how democracies operate worldwide.
All right, Lloyd Mathias, let's leave it at that for now. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And of course, remember, we will be bringing you all the live coverage of the action in the oath-taking ceremony for President Donald Trump all day today and tomorrow. With that, time to slip into another short break. But coming up on the other side, Devin Choksi joins us with the mood of the market. And we also focus on the earnings season with respect to Zomato, Paytm and Dixon Technologies. Stay tuned to Newsline Live.
Your promise is IGI certified. Your legacy is IGI certified. Your ambition is IGI certified. Your diamond is IGI certified. Authentic moments need authentic diamonds. Get your diamonds IGI certified. 14-step grading process. 50 years of trust. IGI Trust Certified.
I will take you to Paris.
Paris नहीं, Paris. तुम्हारा pronunciation भी ना, तुम्हारे इरादे की तक.
मैडम इरादे कभी ऑफ नहीं होते हैं, टेक ऑफ करते हैं.
SBI लाइफ स्मार्ट प्लैटिना सुप्रीम के गारंटीड रिटर्न से करो पूरे अपने इरादे, अपनों से किए सभी वादे. SBI लाइफ, अपने लिए, अपनों के लिए.
welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 right here on News 9 Live. Before we go any further, let's look at the mood of the market. We are about 15 minutes into opening, and let's look at how the Nifty 50 and Sensex are holding up this morning. Well, Nifty is continuing to be in the green this morning. However, a little flattish now. It has fallen below the 23,250 levels. It is down to 23,212 as of now. So is the case with Sensex. Early gains in the morning are being paired now, and Sensex is holding at just about 76,698 levels or so. So that is the update on the markets right now. Joining us now is a very special guest on News 9 Live. We have Mr. Devin Choksi. Mr. Choksi, good morning. How do you see the mood of the market today? Markets opened a little stronger but is now pairing all its gains this morning. What is the mood of the market and what are the triggers which are driving it?
Yes, good morning, Kartik, and thank you for having me on the show. Well, I think the mood of the market is a little circumspect because few events are already there ahead of us. The Trump government has already come into power, so obviously, I think along with all of the Asian market, Indian markets also opened at a higher note, but failed to sustain largely because of the fact that the strong dollar and weakened rupee is definitely affecting the portfolios of foreign investors, particularly those investors who are trading in the Indian market. For them, this weakened currency is definitely affecting them. And as a result of which, they are basically, I think, moving out their money. As we could see that in last month also, I think we have seen them out exodus of around 44,000 crores of FI money. So they take money out because of the weakening of the currency. Till that point of time, you get the handle on stable currency. In my understanding, I think this particular situation is going to remain little weak only, which means that the market will not probably give you the indication to go up. At the same time, it does not want to go down because already corrections have taken place in the prices. So around 23,200 to 22,800 is a range in which the market is expected to consolidate, and thereafter probably I think move up whenever it goes above the higher levels, could possibly move plus 24,200 levels. But I think that is still far off. I think the other event is budget. The budget is definitely, I think, expected to bring up the entire spending by the customers, the consumers in the economy, and that could possibly revive the overall sentiments in the job market as well as in the corporate factories, I would say. So all in all put together, these two events are probably keeping it a little bit more circumspect at this point of time.
Okay, so yeah, of course, two big headline events, but I want to take the first one first with you, Mr. Choksi. Donald Trump swearing in as the 47th President of the United States. If he were to go ahead with the tariff policy that he had announced ahead of being sworn in as President of the United States, what is the kind of impact on foreign investors? Because that is going to result in further strengthening of the dollar, and the FII pullout and the FPI pullout that we've been seeing from the Indian markets, is that likely to continue if the Trump tariff policy were to go ahead?
So he has basically spelled out his intent. I don't think that intent is leading to actions immediately. It's going to be a time-driven process. I think once you say that you want to increase the tariff for whatever reasons under which I think this entire announcement has been made, it means that I think he's serious about bringing the entire business into America. If he ends up getting the Make in America program right, then probably the American economy will revive. And remember, well, he has only 4 years window because he is a second-time president now. So obviously, I think he wants to make the maximum use of this particular 4-year window and try and make America great again. That is what he's claiming. So from that perspective, if you look at it, I think it's not going to happen in hurry. That is one point. Second point, I think vis-a-vis China, India remains, I think, a favorable place for America to continue outsourcing. At the same time, India remains an importer for American products. So obviously, I think they want to make the healthy relationship going forward. The exceptions, as we are calling it as India, is going to remain. And that is what we believe that I think is going to make the positivity into our economy per se particularly. So we are remaining relatively more watchful. At the same time, I think very confident that the things are going to go way up, I think, in our favor actually.
Right. Mr. Choksi, I want to get your view on a few companies and their long-term prospects from an investment standpoint. And these are the companies which are going to announce their Q3 results as well today. So let's begin first with Paytm. 197 Communication, listed as Paytm on the markets, will announce its results today. Brokerages are expecting Paytm's revenue to drop by about 34.4% year-on-year to about 1868 crore levels. And this is compared to the 2850 crore rupees in losses last year. However, on a quarter-on-quarter basis, revenue forecast is expected to grow by 10%. Now, the company's net loss is projected to widen to about 35 crore rupees or so compared to 22 crore rupee loss in the same quarter last year. Now, for context, Paytm posted a net profit of 93 crore in Q2 of FY25. So, investors will focus now on how Paytm's new business segments are performing. But what is your view on the Paytm stock for the long-term investor? Is there a business case and is there any worth in holding on? And we've seen the stock has been rallying. In fact, after exactly a year ago when we saw that massive correction by way of RBI's action, the stock had continued to fall and hit lower circuit, and thereon it has been on an upswing for all of last year. Mr. Choksi, how do you see Paytm going forward?
So I think it's a very pertinent point in question. In my understanding, it's not a unique proposition anymore now. I think the Paytm used to be, I think, a unique proposition somewhere in 2015-16 period. That era is no more available to them. Second most important aspect is that I think the fintech is not the only solution. The balance sheet is the solution. If you have a stronger balance sheet, then probably fintechs can work your way. If you have a weaker balance sheet, I think the fintech even can't help you. And that's what I think the victimization has happened with the Paytm, I believe. I think the kind of loss-making proposition that they have been having in the balance sheet is not helping them at all. And on the contrary, even if I think they start making some profits here and there, current valuations do not justify unless and until we see a sustained profit at a higher pace. If that does not happen, according to me, I think the current valuations will probably give up at some point of time. That's what my take is. Unless a very big differentiator is being created,
right?
They do have, I think, the number of merchants, I think, in their favor. That is the big count that they are having. But beyond that, I think technology is not a mode. That is not a differentiator at this point of time.
All right. Well, no differentiator, and wait for a differentiator is the advice coming out from Devin Choksi. Mr. Choksi, let's move on to another company, another startup that got listed a few years back and has had a roaring success, and this is Zomato. Zomato is also expected to announce its Q3 results today, and as per brokerages, the revenue is expected to rise about 66% on year, while a 55% jump on profits year on year could be expected. Remember, the company's operating margin is expected to grow nearly 4 times year on year, but it might see sequential decline due to higher ESOP costs. Now, the success story in Zomato is not just Zomato's food delivery. In fact, what has outshone that has been Blinkit's growth, and that is something, again, that brokerages are very, very bullish on. So, Mr. Choksi, how do you see the Zomato story playing out from here?
So it's an interesting one. I think I'm a big fan of consumer tech companies, and I believe that I think they have solved seriously, I think, good amount of problem for most of the citizens in the country. So good credit goes to them. But the fact is that I think on the balance sheet side, I think things don't go as well as an analyst, as an investor into the companies. I don't think that I'm getting enough confidence. Simple reason is that even if you're growing at 50-60% rate of growth on top line, bottom line, still at this point of time, the valuations are not at all cheap. Even if one has to assume that 200 crore quarterly profit has to get increased, I think, every successive year by 50% for next 3 years, still you're quoting at a 3 lakh crore plus market capitalization, which is not at all, I think, giving you comfort as far as I think the size of the profit is concerned. Even if one assumes that I think down the line, fast forward 2 years, they will have 5,000 crore worth of profit in the balance sheet. Would you still justify 3 lakh crore worth of market capitalization, which is today? So that is what I think the main argument is, that the businesses are doing excellent, but the market has priced everything upfront and quite in advance. No scope for any error, no scope for degrowth. So in my viewpoint, I think one would like to stay away from it because of the higher and expensive valuation.
All right. Well, higher earning expectation and stay away from Zomato is the word coming in from Mr. Choksi this morning. Mr. Choksi, I also want to talk about another very interesting company, and this again is a stock that we have seen really surge over the years, especially all of last year, and this is Dixon Technologies, the maker of Vivo smartphones as well as a lot of the Samsung products that we consume here in India. Now, in the September quarter, the company reported a net profit of 412 crore rupees for the quarter, making a 265% jump compared to 113 crore rupees in the same period last year. Revenue from operations more than double, rising 133% to 11,500 crore rupees, up from just about 4,943 crore rupees in the corresponding quarter of the last fiscal. So, Mr. Choksi, this again, Dixon Tech is one story that has been central to India's ambition when it comes to Atmanirbharta in electronics manufacturing and all the PLI schemes associated with it. So, how do you view Dixon Tech from here?
So, EMS companies who are engaged in the consumer durables are also for the purpose of, I think, all the consumer products. One among them definitely is standing tall is Dixon. I agree. Again, I think the situation is same on the valuation side. The businesses are doing robust, they are doing exceedingly well, but everything seems to be in price. Because if there is no value left for any kind of rationalization in the numbers going forward, which means that the challenge would be to the investors who bought it at a higher price. God forbid, tomorrow, a couple of quarters down the line, if the growth starts rationalizing from what it is currently, then probably I think this market, the investors will not take time to exit the counter and that too at a significant amount of cut. So in my viewpoint, I think the expensive valuations are required to be looked at, not immediately the story. The story remains intact and it will remain intact as I see it.
I want to quickly shift focus now to one IT sector company which announced its results over the weekend, and this was Wipro. And Wipro stock is up about 8% or so in early trade this morning. What do you make of the IT story now again with Donald Trump coming to office and the debate on H-1B visas as well as keeping American jobs in America and the quarterly results that we've seen from Wipro?
Fortunately, I think most of the Indian IT companies have defied the entire challenge that analysts have posed to them. By way of registering better numbers, better margins, along with a very significant part that a higher amount of inflow of the new orders and get to large size orders, which gives them visibility of 4-5 years in most of the orders. So from that perspective, I think the doubt that one would carry about, I think they're not growing or not producing enough revenue, I think that will at least take a back seat. The second most important aspect, as I see it in this particular activity, they have been systematically rationalizing their entire workforce and employing AI to the best. So in my viewpoint, I think if you keep on doing this particular job of controlling the cost on one side and maintaining the high inflow of large ticket orders, that means I think the company, even though grows moderately, will do a better job than before. Coming to, I think, the entire prospects going ahead, in my understanding, I think from coding to computing is the mantra that most of these companies are adopting, and larger amount of computing would demand higher amount of adoption of AI. Higher amount of adoption of AI means for all the customers that these companies are serving,
right.
It would mean that I think they will require to employ significantly large amount of technology-led platforms, which would probably give them the sustainable revenues going forward. So business model also is changing for many of these companies. So we remain cautiously optimistic about the prospects going ahead for most of the IT companies, and in particular engineering R&D companies, which are relatively better placed compared to the large cap companies.
All right. Cautiously optimistic is the word coming in, Mr. Choksi. Thank you so much for taking time out and joining us here on News9 Live. Let's leave the stock story at that. But moving on to another important piece of news coming in, that the Delhi airport is going to be disrupting some of the flight schedules in the run-up to the Republic Day. Delhi airport operator DIAL on Saturday said there will be no flight arrivals and departures between 10:20 a.m. and 12:45 p.m. for the next 8 days until the 26th of January Republic Day parade. This comes in, of course, ahead of the flypast and the rehearsals that would be taking place for the Republic Day. So from now until the 26th of Jan, there are going to be no flights operating between 10:20 a.m. and 12:45 p.m. So if you're booked on any of those flights, you may want to recheck before proceeding to the airport. And remember, the Indira Gandhi International Airport is the country's busiest airport and handles around 1,300 flights daily. All right, and moving on, the TikTok ban has been reversed. TikTok announced it was restoring service to its users in the United States on Sunday after it briefly went dark in anticipation of a law forcing it to shut down in the country. The video sharing app said the reversal was thanks to US President-elect Donald Trump, who said he would revive the app in the US after he was sworn into office on Monday. Take a look.
TikTok announced it was restoring service to users in the U.S. on Sunday after it briefly went dark in anticipation of a law forcing it to shut down in the country. The video sharing app said the reversal was thanks to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, who said he would revive the app in the U.S. after he was sworn into office on Monday. A bipartisan law had threatened to force TikTok to either divest its U.S. operations or shut down, citing national security concerns and data risks due to the app's Chinese parent company, ByteDance. A unanimous U.S. Supreme Court upheld the law on Friday. But on Sunday, Trump wrote on Truth Social that he would postpone the period of time before the law took effect and set a goal, 50% ownership in the app by U.S. investors. He said, quote, "By doing this, we save TikTok, keep it in good hands, and allow it to stay up." Trump's support for TikTok is a reversal from when he first pushed for the ban in 2020 while in office. Even if temporary, the unprecedented shutdown of TikTok could have a wide-ranging impact. The U.S. has never before banned a major social media platform. The law, passed overwhelmingly by Congress, gives the incoming Trump administration sweeping authority to ban or seek the sale of other Chinese-owned apps. Privately held ByteDance is about 60% owned by institutional investors such as BlackRock and General Atlantic, while its investors and employees own 20% each. It has more than 7,000 employees in the U.S.
Well, that's all we have time for on Morning Brief at 9. News and updates will continue right here on News 9 live at 10 o'clock. Yash Goyal will be here to bring you all the latest updates happening in India and around the world. And before I go, a word of thanks to our outgoing producer Lakshana Gulati, who's helped us put this show together over the last few days. Thanks so much for watching.
तेरा बच्चा मेरा नाम जरूर रोशन करेगा।
बच्चों से नाम रोशन करवाने का परफेक्ट प्लान, कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस चाइल्ड प्लान। कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, प्रॉमिसेस का पार्टनर।
We have people coming in